The short answer, yes. Many of my characters could, would, and should be invincible in a fight to the death. For today's video, however, we're going to be using a list of 10 characters I picked based off my top 10 favorites. They will all be put into the same scenario and thrust into a battle against Mark in the exact same way. Sort of. Also, yes, I know this is a very different style from what I normally make with my content, but I'm trying something new. I'm just here to have fun. Let's make our list of characters real quick. I don't have cover art or pictures for all of them, so any that I don't have something like that for, I will include their Minecraft 3D design from the Document 17 mod. First up, we have Reckon. Then we have Pulse, Meldcast, Multilight, Zirconium, Olympian, Caster, Buggo, Powercore, and Dester, which is a longer list than I thought it was going to be. I'm choosing right after Season 3, perhaps around a month after Mark beats Conquest, and in these alternate reality fights, it's going to be the same situation where Mark is just helping clean up and a multiversal portal opens up. Obviously, it'll have to be green, because that's the colors that Angstrom used, that his portals were green. So, this causes Mark to go into a rage and try to kill the person who steps through. Which means, first up on this list, we have Reckon, the immortal man whose greatest threat would be his armor. Firstly, Reckon's armor is built out of a metal called Sank, which is basically like Marvel's Vibranium, but on steroids. The metal is entirely indestructible, nothing on Earth can break it. The suit that Reckon makes, comprised of this Sank metal, is equipped with lasers, rockets. It even has self-repairing features. It's got a vial of Bioforce, negative Bioforce, a Magic Stone, Warp Zone Crystal, and a Cringe Point Stone. All this to say, after hundreds of thousands of years, Reckon has made a suit of armor that could fight Superman. He'd probably still lose against Superman, because Superman is strong enough to punch through Sank, because Sank has to have a limit, but still. Alright, so our battle will begin with Reckon just stepping through the portal, and he glances around, he's confused because he's never been to this universe, and then suddenly Mark just slams into the back of him. The only thing that kept Mark from immediately splitting Reckon into two people would be his armor, because, as we've established, the stank is super strong. And since Reckon would be stepping through a portal from clearly another universe that would most likely have been a green portal, Mark would assume he is with Angstrom, so in a blind rage he would be attempting to kill Reckon. As a result of this, Mark then spends a couple of minutes giving Reckon no time to think or process what is happening, as he just slams his fist into Reckon over and over and over. And eventually, Reckon would just give up on trying to defend himself. After a while, Mark begins to overpower the durability of the Sank armor because, as we've seen, Mark is pretty strong, and I would say he's just strong enough to start denting it, and then if he puts in more strength to the point where, like, what he did against Conquest, where he is so powerful he can just push through his body's natural limits and just rip the bone through his own body. If he did that to Sank, it would break. And because Mark rips the Sank apart and has already shown that he's completely immune to almost everything else Reckon can throw at him, which Reckon hasn't really had a chance to throw anything at him because, aside from being immortal and his regeneration, Reckon is just a guy with lots of information and intelligence. Anyways, after Mark has just been brutally beating into Reckon, he eventually, punches through the Sank around the chest area, because that would probably be where most of his plows would most likely hit. So that would be where it weakens, and eventually, Mark reaches in and grabs Reckon, from the inside, and rips him out from the armor, breaking the armor off of him, and then Mark would just continue to beat down on Reckon. However, Reckon is immortal, so he can't die, but on top of that, he has regeneration that makes Deadpool and Wolverine look like they are regular people. Like, his regeneration is so fast, if you stab him with any regular sword, it will shred the sword. That's how fast he regenerates. However, it works like a muscle, so the more his regeneration is used, the slower and weaker it gets, because just like a muscle, the more you use one, the slower and weaker your muscle would get. So, due to this, after enough fighting, Reckon would eventually get overpowered again by Mark, and Mark would break through Reckon's regeneration and eventually do something like rip him in half. However, Reckon has one final trick up his sleeve, which is, upon death, Reckon respawns back in his home universe in the last place he slept in that universe. So, even though Mark technically wins this fight, Reckon still is alive, which means there could be a round 2. Next up on our list against Mark is Pulse, who is my favorite speedster, who has an ability I call Warp Zone Connection Control, which grants him super speed, regeneration, interdimensional travel, time manipulation, teleportation, the ability to grant connection controls to other for a short time cloning, or displacement. And, yeah, the fight is essentially Pulse runs into Mark's universe and doesn't know what's happening. Mark tries to attack him, and Pulse uses his speed to just get out of the way, and then he goes max speed, manipulating space-time, traveling way past the speed of light, slamming into Mark, and ripping open a black hole before eventually speeding off into his own universe again. Leaving our Mark, his entire world is just... Which, yeah, Pulse shouldn't be that powerful, but I'm taking the most powerful versions of each of these characters against Mark, because I'm pitting my strongest against his strongest. Which, that puts us at 1 win, 1 loss, although it's sort of a draw, although I'm going to say Reckon is just loss. And then, so, I know Meldcast is part of this list, but if I'm going to be honest, I think Meldcast, because of how versatile and unique his powers are, I need to do a whole video on just him, so if I do a good job on this video and you're interested even a little bit in what might happen between fighting them, I will go in and I'll create 3 different variations of what could happen, and I'll do that entire fight. So we're going to move on to Multilight before we get caught up on Meldcast, because I could spend a 3-hour video talking about Meldcast and still have stuff to go over. So, on to Multilight, he's pretty simple. His power is anything he touches, he can create a permanent clone of. So if he touches himself, and I don't mean like that, like if he presses 2 fingers together, or if he, like, any part of his body touches any other part of his body, hell, that includes if his hair falls down to his forehead, he can clone himself, or just a fraction of himself, because he can choose shapes out of the objects he's cloning, which gives him a slightly greater variation. Therefore, what happens is Multilight would enter this world, and, well, it kind of depends on... There are 2 ways this could happen. Mark gets to Multilight and kills him before he can clone himself, or Multilight manages to clone himself before Mark can kill him, and then because all of those Multilights, just like Multipol and Duplicate, the Multilight, all of them have the duplication powers, which means we could have Mark fighting an army of people who can clone anything they can touch. And that includes the, like, stone that makes up a road, like the asphalt, anything. And they could shape weapons out of that. They could even go up to Mark and grab his arm and clone his own bones and stab him with his own bones, turning Mark into a weapon against himself. So the fight between Multilight and Mark is entirely if Mark is fast enough to kill Multilight before he realizes what's happening. That is the deciding factor on who wins. Next up, we're going to Zirconium, who... well, he's insanely powerful, because he's got super strength, super speed, flight. He has a mild regeneration. also has superhuman reflexes, but one of his most powerful abilities is when he feels pain or takes injury, his body hardens itself and he gains durability for a short time, and that durability is actually what converts into his regeneration to return him back to normal. And on top of all those powers, he also has the ability to convert any matter into zirconium, and then he can manipulate that sort of like Magneto from the X-Men. So just imagine a dude who can regenerate, super strong, super fast, flying, but also with all of Magneto's powers. It's really, really powerful. However, Mark's raw strength, since I'm assuming he wouldn't be holding back at all, he would just one-punch Zirconium in the face and just kill him before Zirconium ever had the chance to strengthen his body. And since Mark is probably 30 times faster than Zirconium in every way, even the strongest versions of Zirconium, as powerful as Zirconium is, like, he's ridiculously OP, Mark's powers just go perfectly against Zirconium. It's almost like he was made to be the anti-Zirconium, which is kind of crazy. Alright guys, let's move on to Olympian, who's got 3 powers. He can create force-filled discs of green solid energy. So imagine Green Lantern in terms of the ability to create solid discs, but that's all they are. It's like he can create magical frisbees, pretty much. He can also create any weapon imaginable. If he can even combine weapons, he can give them enchantments. If it's a weapon, he can create it as long as it's non-cosmic level. So that means he can't create like an insta-kill ray or a sword that will target somebody until they die. Like, he can create like a dagger that does extra damage against a specific target, but like no insta-kill stuff. That just doesn't work with his powers because of a lot of backstory that once I get the book published you'll understand more about. But anyways, moving on, he also has a personal force field, which is, you know those force fields from Halo where if you get shot it can break, but most of the time doesn't? Just imagine that, but he has the ability to produce them, and he can put them onto anything he can touch, not including the air, because I don't like that. That makes him way more powerful than he should be. Anyways, he has the ability to put force fields similar to the Halo force fields onto anything he touches, including himself or his weapons, and they can take a serious amount of damage. However, I'm just going to go off script here. I'm just going to stop reading from the script for a moment, because I don't know what I said, but it doesn't matter how I think about it. Olympian can't win against Mark, because sure, Olympian can just create a nuke next to him, but that would just kill Olympian, and Mark has already been shown to not be affected by nukes. So we're just going to move on, because it doesn't matter what Olympian does, he loses. Script here is Caster. This guy is Mark's perfect counter, because Caster, as you can probably figure out by the name, is versed in every single style of magic. That includes gene editing magic, world editing magic, raw magic, basic magic, advanced magic, dark magic, light magic, elf magic, ice magic, elemental, any kind of magic ever, Caster knows, because he has a unique feature in his brain, which isn't a superpower, it's just a natural ability where if he can see someone do something, he can then replicate what they're doing, sort of like Taskmaster, but better. Because Taskmaster, as we've seen, like, because if Taskmaster could, he could just watch Doctor Strange through a screen for a little bit and just copy his powers, but he can't, whereas Caster can. And that's why Caster can see a spell and then immediately use it again. Which, what I mean by this is, he can literally cast a soul-body separation spell on Mark, which leaves Mark's body fully vulnerable, and since the soul can't interact with Caster, that just lets him do whatever he wants to Mark's body, so there is nothing Mark can do against Caster to win. He just doesn't win. Next up, we're going to go on to Buggo, the Egyptian godlike being who has the ability to become, mind control, create, and destroy, or use the abilities of any insect, spider, or arachnid, anything. Insects, bugs, arachnids, all 3 of those groups are included into Buggo. and he's a godlike being who was made around Egyptian times with the ability to anything any of those groups can. He can spin webs from any parts of his body like a spider. He can produce stingers from any parts of his body like a wasp. He can create spider legs. He can friggin' use the bombarder beetle to shoot liquid flame from any part of his body. He can become a swarm of insects, which Invincible, I mean, I don't care how powerful you are, even a Kryptonian would eventually start taking damage. If Buggo turned into a swarm of insects and went inside of Mark's body, like a swarm of ants, and then crawled into Mark because, well, even if Mark closes his mouth, well, there are still like 7 other entry points to the human body that they can enter through. So, Buggo's getting in there one way or another, whether it's the ears, the eyes, the nose, other locations. But, yeah. Buggo's getting in there, and then he can just shapeshift inside of frickin' Mark's body and just turn into like some sort of like fire ant or beetle and just eat Mark from the inside until Mark's body freaking gives out, and then he dies. Mark loses. It doesn't matter how it happens because Buggo's body, his soul, exists within a 3-mile radius that can interact with any bug or insect or arachnid within that section. So the only way to kill Buggo is to nuke him, and I specifically made it that way. I made Buggo only able to be killed from a nuke. Yes, the only way to kill him is he has to be died. I might keep that. I'm keeping that. Alright, so moving on from Buggo, because he wins, we have Power Core, who, it doesn't matter how much I weaken him, because he has any ability ever in relation to energy. He can create electrical energy, he can create light energy, plasma, he can destroy it. He can even turn it into matter, or he can turn matter into energy. Although, converting matter to and from energy is an advanced skill most versions of Power Core don't have, so in this scenario, let's say this version of Power Core doesn't have that, because if he does, he wins without question. Well, he still wins, because no matter what Mark does, Power Core has an infinite amount of energy that he can just keep shooting at people. He's like, Iron Man Armored Adventures has a character called the Living Laser, who is sort of like the weakest version of a Power Core you could get, where he can just become living energy and just slam into things and do other stuff. That's the weakest that Power Core can be at once his powers are fully awakened. And yes, I know Iron Man won, but realistically he shouldn't have been able to. And I mean, going off script a little here, we've already been off script talking about Iron Man Armored Adventures because that wasn't on the script, but who cares? I'm gonna say Power Core wins, though if someone could give me a logical, reasonable argument, say from the comics, because I'm a animated show only, I will concede defeat. However, Power Core has the ability to manipulate electricity, which means he can manipulate the electrical signals in a person's brain, nervous system, or body to literally change someone's memories or information in their brain. He can constrict your movements and literally cause your body to lock up. Or he can do what the Muller twins did and just destroy temporarily your entire nervous system, which causes an insane amount of pain and also prevents you from moving. Oh, and not to mention, because he can manipulate the electrical signals inside of a person's body, he can cause Mark to feel any emotion or false pain that isn't actually even there. Moving on, we're gonna move on to Dester, who is the final character on my list of 10. Who I'm gonna say it's a draw. I'm gonna go completely off script. I'm not even gonna read any of the script that I wrote for Dester. I'm gonna go straight. Dester is an immortal demon who comes straight from hell. He is the jester for Lucifer in my entire storyline and everything. And his powers are strengthened when someone has joy or laughter and enjoyment. Fuel the energy that fuels Dexter. However, since Mark wouldn't be laughing at all, in fact, no one would be laughing anywhere near him, Dexter's power would not be able to charge, and the more he fought Mark, the weaker he would become, until eventually Mark would overpower him. So I think what happens is it would be a draw in the situation where Dexter and Mark die laying next to each other. But because Dexter's a demon, he just reforms back in hell, obviously. But Invincible, or Mark, still technically killed Dexter, so I'm going to call it a draw. Alright, so I've been, 15, 20 minutes sitting here talking to a microphone about my characters fighting someone else's characters, and I tried to be as fair as possible, so let me know if you have any issues with any aspects of anything I brought up, or if you want me to expand on anything further. And if you somehow stuck around through my literal rambling, because I wrote like 5 pages of a script, but mostly didn't use it at all. Like, I mostly just used it as a reference point. Anyways, my point is, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and go check out my traditional content, which is gaming stuff, because unless this video does really well, this will probably be a one-off standalone video. So go check out the rest of my stuff.